So welcome back to the Hearth. We're having a conversation, Kristin, Eileen, Allison, and I tonight on imprints. And we're going to talk about imprints generally and introduce you to our diverse opinions, since we do have, they're a little different, each one of us, but we invite you just to listen, and we'll have more conversations about specific imprints as well another time. Would anyone like to start?
I could start. What was arising for me as I was listening to you, Kate, is, I always like to orient first. And so if I were to orient to what is an imprint, um, for me, I'd say an imprint is a body memory, a somatic memory of something that happened to us or the way that we responded to it, our strategy to deal with that challenge. And so the challenging situation that our body is remembering really happened, and um, how we responded to it really happened. And then what can happen is that if there is no integration of that, if there's no processing of that, unwinding the experience and how we responded to it, then we can go on through childhood and adulthood, um, feeling like we're still in that situation and using the strategies from that non-optimal state, in a lifelong way. So that is the first thing that comes up for me as I'm orienting to this topic.
Thanks, Eileen.
Beautifully said. I'm thinking, to add to that, I really liked how you say, there's an experience that we have, and that experience leaves an impression on us or an imprint on us, and that can sort of make an impression in many different ways. One is like you said, how we respond to that experience, and that could be how we shape our body. Like if we move away, it can be a belief that we have that's, there's something that's said or a thought that's shared that can somehow, their neural networks created such that we believe that. And because we're so vulnerable or so open at, prenatally, that we don't know the difference between someone else and ourselves. And so we can take on whatever's being shared or felt. So like energetically, physically, emotionally, beliefs, those can all be imprinted upon us. And then the other part that I liked what you said is, if we're not supported to actually be with that and differentiate from another person, or to move through whatever it is that is making impression, then it can then become fixated in us, so that we can't, like you said, the experience did happen, our responses did happen, and but we might not know that it's over. Or when the memory comes, we may think that it's still or is happening right now. And I think in saying that, it helps me sort of orient to one of the other reasons why we're talking about this, is what can be useful about actually understanding imprints, one, that they exist, and then what do we do about them once they show up. And yeah, I feel like Allison, you had something to share about that. And so I don't know if you want to chime in here.
Sure. Um, Thanks, Kristin. I like what you said about not knowing that it's not over. I know for myself, I had such a personal experience with that around an imprint. And I remember I was having a session with Ray, and he very simply said to me, "That is over. That happened to you when you were at such an age, but that is no longer happening to you now." And it was huge because I could feel how my nervous system was still in a hyper alert, looking over my shoulder in a way, thinking that something was still occurring in this present moment. So when Ray was able to identify that, then I could identify it inside of myself rather than being so identified with it. You know, it was as if I had become that imprint my whole life. And I remember walking away from that session with him and repeating it to myself over and over as my new mantra: that is over. You know, and this particular imprint was someone in my life who actually was no longer alive. So I would say, and he is dead. And he is no longer in my life. And this is no longer happening right now. And what I was describing earlier when we were all talking is what a relief that is to have the imprint named, to be able to step back and see it for what it is, and then realize there's this whole other reality. There's more to life than that imprint. And that I am not that imprint. I'm the blueprint. I'm my essence. I'm my larger self. And I could then be curious about that. Who am I here? If I'm not looking over my shoulder, thinking this person is still behind me or around me. How can my energy, be if it's not focused on the imprint? If I can trust being open, who am I now? And it was such a relief for me in my life.
Thanks, Allison. What I hear you talking about is just the power of naming and the power of recognition, especially if it's done from a place of presence of someone who knows, like you can feel it in someone when they know, and as opposed to thinking that they know. There's the ways that when Ray sat with you, I'm sure you could really feel his presence and his knowing. And some of the things that we talked about earlier before we started our conversation for the recording, I think I heard you say, Eileen, some wonderful things about how the health organizes around an imprint, or let's say it's an experience that's overwhelming. So it holds that, and it becomes a structure inside of us or a shape. And we think it's us, like you said, Allison. We think it's us when it's really not. And really understanding that this is something that did happen. Like the metaphor that I often use with my students is the quote from storyteller Gamble Rogers, who is a troubadour, traveling storyteller and musician, who said, life is like a boa constrictor. You don't know if you're holding it or is it holding you. Just helping people recognize that you may have things that have happened, but you want to have consciousness around it, and you want to be holding the boa constrictor. But often the snake's holding us, right? Like squeeze. So it's like, all right, I want to have consciousness and hold this imprint and know that's an imprint. And then when we catch ourselves in the imprint, you go, oh, okay, I see you. I got you. I understand. Um, Let me just pause and come back into present time. Like it did happen and it's over. So, yeah.
One of the things that I like about, I think it was Anna Chitty who basically talks about, I mean, we had her on talking about the blueprint, and one of the things I really learned from her was that the imprints actually come from the blueprint. It
Hmm.
is like our health in response to an experience that we're having or to the environment, and it's how we respond from what we are able to do with what tools we have, what maturity we are, like where we are in development and what is available to us at that point. And so there's something about when we realize our imprints or when they're named and we can acknowledge and be with them, it can help us access the energy that's caught up in that imprint, and that energy that, when it's free, then we have many more options available to us that we might not have had back then because we were too small or because we didn't have a voice, or um, just developmentally weren't able to do something differently. And so if we can in some ways access the imprint and like I don't want to say let it go, but access the energy that's caught in it and like just release it a little somewhat, then there may be many more things available to us today. Yeah, I feel like there's more to say there, and I'm not quite catching it. You
Yeah,
tell
I
me,
want to
Eric.
know, like what, Kristen? Like, I'm thinking about an example, and I think you said something too, Allison. Like it provides, you have much more access to something in your life, and like I remember long ago, like when I started studying with William Emerson, like this is when, like over 20 years ago, he always tells the story about how his health got so much better when he started working on his imprints. And I feel like you have to put out a beacon of hope to people. Like, yeah, start down this pathway, understanding pre-verbal things that happened that you are still running in your system. And if you can integrate those, your health gets better. And I don't know if you have an example, but I sort of feel like um, having the power of recognition of I am in an imprint. Oh, I don't have to do this. I can do something else with this. This is over. I don't know if anybody has an example or anything they'd like to add.
Well, my whole life is an example. A lot of the healing modalities that I've gotten into since my 20s really were me just learning skills to manage chronic pain, chronic physical pain. I think I related more to the physical pain than the emotional pain. I feel like I was too dissociated to really understand the gravity of my emotional pain. But the physical pain was a constant, a constant reminder. And my phone is ringing. So I spent many years looking for outside in therapies that would help fix these different kinds of pain in these different situations. And I got very good at a lot of therapies, both being a provider and also receiving those therapies. And at this point, I live fairly pain-free. And when it comes up just a little bit when I feel just a little twinge of those things that are old and familiar. I start to work on my imprint. I start to, I realize that that's actually some part of myself calling me back to myself. And then I start to acknowledge the histories that have happened, how they want to be remembered. And usually within a day, I can now turn around the physical pain and actually make it go away by really acknowledging the history, either mine or that of my ancestors. So it's, for me, I actually am just so delighted and about that aspect of our work, about how the integrating and transforming imprints can improve physical health.
Yeah. Thanks for saying that, Eileen. I mean, I can give an example of that as well. I used to get really bad migraines, and I was in a womb surround, had worked on my intention, I was well prepared. And then right before my turn, I got this horrible migraine. And so I felt like I can't go and I'm going to be distracted by the migraine. And Ray said to me, "You're getting the migraine because it's your session. It's not something to override or avoid, but let's work with it." And I learned all about the toxic womb experience and how I survived by controlling the umbilical cord and how much toxicity went into me. And it showed me layers of imprints of how the toxins would die down at night when everyone went to bed. So then I felt like I could breathe again, and I felt like I was safe and free. And a part of me has always enjoyed nighttime when everyone goes to bed. My whole childhood, that was my favorite time because everyone was asleep, and I always felt this space that I could really breathe in and be in. And so and it's not the most healthy imprint to be a night owl all the time. Um, so I had to learn that, again, that's what happened back then. I survived a very toxic womb, um, and I'm not in a toxic womb anymore. Um, I'm not surviving it anymore. I've actually created a very healthy environment for me in my home with air purifiers and, but I can see when I go into a toxic environment, my body will start to go into reaction. Um, and so I'm very careful not to put myself in toxic environments unless, I have to do something in it. But um, it's amazing to me how the body responds and has that memory to go into protecting yourself. And that part of my body wanted me to remember the toxic womb experience. And the result of that is it released my migraines. Or if I start to get a migraine, I realize there's a toxic environment here. I don't have to be in it. I can walk away from it. Whereas when I was in the womb, I couldn't walk away from it. I had to survive it. But now I have choice, and I can put myself in a healthy environment that has no toxicity. I don't have to be in an environment that I'm surviving. So that was a huge relief. And I've also stopped getting migraines unless I understood why I got them. And if they occur, then I really am conscious of, okay, what's the toxicity around me? Is there something I need to take care of?
Well, thanks, Allison.
I can share an example too, and I think there's something about wanting to highlight that imprints can be also really good for us, that they're a necessary part of our development, because that's what helps us be able to walk every day, to be able to ride a bike and not have to learn things over and over again. The memory of doing something can help us grow and continue along. And so the example I'm going to give actually shows both. Is one is when there's an overwhelming situation and I feel under resourced, it can really bring up the memory of not having enough support around, and also then feeling very alone in that experience, because just because of my history, that there was, I was adopted, and so there was a place where I lost a lot of the family support and the immediate support around me, and found myself alone, but not alone. I mean, alone in an orphanage, single by myself, but surrounded by people. And so there's that experience of how to feel support when some layers of it have fallen away. And then my experience of really being alone in that and not knowing what to do. There was one experience I had where I was really deeply in this place of what do I do? And when, I could allow myself to really be in the imprint and let go in it. And when I did, there was something there that I wasn't expecting. This belief came up, or this knowing that even if I don't know how, I will survive. And so in the midst of what felt like a huge crisis and no resources, which was the imprint, there was also this other thing that emerged, which helped me through it. And that was the realization that even if I didn't know what was next or how I would make it, there was also the imprint that I will survive, because I did. And when that came in, like almost everything opened up. Nothing changed immediately, but there was a new relationship to what was happening, and I could actually allow more of what was happening, and trusting that, okay, not quite sure why this is happening or what the next step is, but somehow if I can just let into it, that I'd make it out the other side.
Kristin.
Thanks, Kristin.
Yeah, thanks.
I think that the power of presence, what I hear is you're able to be with that difficult place until you got it all the way through to the other side. You use those words, and that is also my experience. But I find sometimes it really helps to have somebody who knows how to be with that imprint. I don't know if that happened with you, Kristin, if you had somebody. But
I didn't have someone specifically, but I would say this work really helped me then be with the experience more. And that's what you're saying, the presence, as we do more work with some of our imprints, then we can be with them as they are, so that something else can arise. Another truth or another part of that health from the blueprint can also show up. That was my experience in that moment.
Yeah, I've had equally powerful experiences, and the story I tell about one of my imprints is the near death I experienced I had at birth, and how it comes back as a memory, especially when I'm able to really relax, and especially if I'm with a talented cranial practitioner. But the adrenalated state that wants to integrate connected to near death will come up. And it hasn't in a long time because I think I've kind of extinguished this. I've read it, as John Chitty would say, I've ridden it all the way to the beach. But it was Anna Chitty that helped there just to be curious about this feeling in my body that I was going to die. And uh, and she knew it was a memory. So she just kept asking questions. I'm like, oh, tell me more about that. And, I figured if she wasn't afraid, I'm not going to be afraid. And with her guidance and with her curiosity, I became curious. And just going into the imprint, I had this amazing experience of compassion in my heart, which she explained later was my tissue had released from stopping and then starting again. So I think that there's just there's great benefits from working with your imprints and knowing that underneath them is always this place of our essential nature or our energy or our health in the stories that you all have told. So it's good. It's good to know your imprints and be with them.
Well, what I'm appreciating about there was something you said, Kate, you were asking Kristin whether there was somebody who could relate to the experience. And that's one of our interests, is to have more talks about specific imprints. And in my experience, I think we can hold space for somebody even if we don't have the same experience. But there is something really powerful if you, as the person who's holding space, can relate to that person's experience in a way that really reflects it is accurately for them.
Yeah.
I agree with what you're saying, Eileen. And I just want to bring up what you were saying earlier, Kate, before we started, about the years of experience it takes to have the ability to not only sit with our own imprints, but to sit with the imprints of others. And I mean, I really appreciate that place of experience when when someone is supporting me. There's just knowing that they have unwound and worked through a lot of these places in themselves. I feel as if I get to co-regulate with someone who has that knowledge in their nervous system. And there's something about that experience and that knowledge in the other person's nervous system that really influences me. That helps me feel that sense of hope that you were talking about before, just by being with that person. I mean, I used to see that with Ray at the Beba clinic when, parents would bring in their screaming, crying babies and be like, I don't know what to do. And they would hand the baby to Ray and the baby would stop crying. The baby would just go, oh, this person knows. Person knows about me. This person knows about this whole realm of experience, and they would just relax. And it happened many times, and parents would just look at Ray and go, how did you do that? It was really powerful. So I learned a lot by observing that and witnessing that. And I really respect and value the the experience of being with someone who has the strength of presence in their own inner journey and who can hold that space for my journey. And vice versa. It's such a good feeling to be able to do that for someone else in these young places.
there's something about what you're saying, Alison, of like just knowing and trusting that that imprint comes from a place of health, and that there's something being expressed. And this goes back to what you were also saying, Kate, of like, when we know that and we can trust it and bring curiosity to it, something can shift. And it's the difference between trying to get rid of an imprint and trying and being with it to access what's there, the health that's there, the energy that's caught or fixated in that imprint, and differentiating and orienting to what's available to us now, because some of those imprints are actually really, really still healthy and needed today. There are certain circumstances where it may be really still needed to move away or turn or shut down or whatever the case may be. And the question isn't, or maybe the goal isn't to get rid of it, but how do we learn the health of that response and then wonder or bring curiosity, is that needed in this moment right now? Yeah.
Does this feel like a okay place to stop and and then say to people listening, have our community conversation about imprints, but more to come about specific imprints that we know of and that we have all studied over the years. So, see you then.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Yeah.